Okay, well, we might get things underway. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alison Airy and I'm the CEO of ACBC New South Wales. So thank you if you're joining us from locked down Sydney. I know life is a lot more complicated under lockdown. A brief introduction of ACBC for those of you who don't know. We've been in existence since 1973. We're a non-profit organisation and we exist to support links between Australia and China. And we do that in three ways: by offering insights, such as today's webinar, providing a platform for networking, and also doing advocacy. And it's the advocacy at the moment in this time of political tensions between the two that we find particularly important. So we'll get the presentations underway. We're really pleased to be offering this presentation, and I think its popularity is really a testament to the importance of this area to our trading relationship. And I know there's a lot of interest in getting the knowledge that we're going to present today. We will have presentations from Dr. Huang and then another presentation from Victor To from Blossoms BH. And then we'll have some questions from me, and then we'll open the webinar up to questions from the audience. So get ready to ask your questions through the Q&A section, and I'll read those out to Dr. Huang and Victor To. So I have great pleasure in introducing Dr. Huang, who's Associate Professor at the University of Sydney. She specialises in conflict of laws and digital trade and e-commerce. She's widely recognised as an active and productive scholar in this interdisciplinary area. And she's written extensively. She also writes about dispute resolution involving China and Chinese parties. So we'll get the legal perspective on this area before passing to Victor, who'll give us the business perspective. So over to you, Dr. Huang.
Thank you very much, Alison. So thank you everybody for turning up. And today I'm going to talk about the e-commerce, especially focus on how to export Australian products to China. So actually we are very lucky. Just yesterday afternoon, especially, the General Office of the China State Council printed the opinions on accelerating the development of new types and models of foreign trade. And one new type of model is the cross-border online e-commerce, which is the topic today. So at the very beginning, I would like to compare the significance of what I call the CERI, is the cross-border e-commerce retail import in terms of law. The first chart is the general trade and the classical models of trade liberalization. So for example, WTO. So the foreign suppliers, for example, Australian suppliers, they sell products to importers. So the goods cross the border, the national border, we call international sales to importers. And then importers sell to domestic consumers. And there are two very important features in the classical model of trade liberalization. The first is the consumers. Consumers in the classical model have never directly purchased products from the international markets. They purchase products, for example, Australian formula milk in China, rather than directly from international markets. And what I'm going to talk about is the CERI. It enables consumers to become importers. The first feature create a great legal significance in terms of custom declaration, because consumers, they are the importers. And it creates a significance for the government regulation of the products' qualities, the labeling requirement, for example, And the last one is the dispute resolution. So for example, consumers have issues, have disputes, okay, regarding the qualities of products, regarding the transportation. The second important feature is the government regulation in terms of the trade. So if you look at the classical model, there are two ways of government regulation. One is on the border regulation. So for example, Chinese government imposed tariff on Australian wine, okay? So let's on the border regulation, tariff. There are also non-tariff measures. So for example, Australian lobster has been, accused or has been alleged to have some sanitary issues. So these are the non-tariff measures. So on the border regulation. The second way of government regulation in the classical model is behind the border regulation. It means when the products enter the Chinese borders. So for example, labeling requirements. A typical issue is for the formula milk, right? And Australian formula milk must comply with the requirement, the quality labeling requirement in China, consumer protection, etc. And regarding the second feature, the government regulation, if you look at the cross-border e-commerce retail import, and the second feature is very different. So the first is the border measure. So if we export the products to China by the so-called cross-border e-commerce retail import, there is no tariff. So the same Australian wine, if you export it to Australia under the classical model, you are subject to tariff. However, if you go through the cross-border e-commerce retail import, it's zero tariff, okay? There are very few non-tariff measures, and I'm going to further elaborate. And the second part of government regulation is behind the border measures. And compare with the classical models, the CERI model also significantly reduced the behind the border measures, especially regarding the labeling requirements. Okay, I'm also going to further elaborate later. So I have a recent paper on which you can scan the QR code. You can download the paper. So this paper is mostly about a theoretical analysis. Academic love to do that, and also examine whether Chinese regulation on CERI, cross-border e-commerce retail import, has complied with WTO requirement. But today I'm going to focus on the practical aspects of my paper. So first, how will you conduct CERI? So the CERI need to go through the pilot cities. So if you look at this map is for January 2020. And also very recently, last March, 4 months ago, China expanded the scope of pilot city, the number of pilot city. Now, not only the red spot on this map, but also all the comprehensive bounded zones in China, cross-border e-commerce comprehensive pilot zones in China and pilot free trade zones are opened to conduct CERI. And if we look into the details of CERI, as a business person, how will you export Australian products, for example, Australian wine through CERI to China, even in the context of Australian-China tension? So you need to go through, you need to rely on the Customer Supervision Code 12110 or Customer Supervision Code 96110. So basically there are two types of CERI. One is bounded import and second is direct import. And bounded import is further divided into two subcategories. But the first category is the mainstream. The second one, the 1239, is a very small subcategory. So what are the differences between the bounded import and the direct import? So bounded import, it means foreign export. Foreign exporters, you export a large volume of products to China, and you put it into the bounded warehouse in China in the pilot cities. Chinese consumer place order online while the e-commerce platform registered in China. Upon upon receiving Chinese consumers' order, you dispatch products from the bounded warehouse in China. Let's call it bounded import. And the second type is direct import, which means that you have warehouse, in Australia, for example, and then you sell your products through the e-commerce platform registered in China. Again, upon receiving Chinese consumers' order, you dispatch your products from Australia to China. There are pros and cons in these two ways of CERI, two models of CERI. Basically, bounded import is suitable for big exporters because you gain economic value. It's more cost saving by exporting a large volume of products on one time into China. But if you are a very small exporters, or it's the first time you try Chinese market, the direct import is more suitable for you. And what are the differences between these two subcategories under the bounded import? That's because 1 to 110 should be conducted in pilot cities and enjoying these very significant benefits. For example, cosmetic, infant formula milk, medical equipment, special food, and other items, which are imported into China for the first time under the code, must obtain an import license. However, if you go through 1 to 110 while the pilot cities, you do not need to comply with the registration requirement. And the second is the import and consumption focus. You probably know, recently China opened up the Hainan Island and built a huge duty-free shops in Hainan. So what's the difference between duty-free shops in China, which are concrete stores, right? Versus CERI, which is the online sale. And I argue that there is a significant strategic difference for China's development. Because CERI, online sale, it is not only Chinese consumer and foreign exporters. It involved a third party, which is the e-commerce platform. And developing CERI can help China to shape international e-commerce regulation on the platform. And the platform economy is something China really eager to build, to shape, and to establish its leading place in the international legal framework. However, duty-free shop is only to satisfy consumer needs. It does not create such a strategic significance for China's international economic law, international outlooking. Again, the CERI is aligned with China's 2018 trade policy from export-oriented to import-oriented, and a balance between import and export, and also facilitate China's e-commerce. The third part, trade exemption and reduce internal tax. This is especially significant in the context of Australia and China trade tension because it's tariff-free. Although China has imposed tariff on various Australian products for anti-dumping issues, but those anti-dumping duty does not apply to CERI products. The products, export while CERI. So besides tariff rate, And there is also import value added tax and consumption tax reduction, which is 70%. Okay, it's really very significant. And these are the statistics I recently obtained from MOFCOM, the China Ministry of Commerce. So you can see there's a huge increase in 2017. This is because the tariff-free and the value-added VAT and consumption tax reduction was initiated in 2018. Okay, so you see a huge increase of CERI. And then, you know, from each year, you may see, hey, the trade value, actually, you know, this is the increase, okay? The increase percentage looks like, you know, a little bit of decrease, but this is not true because the base of the trade, the CERI, the base of the trade is increasing significantly. So each year you see it is increased, but because the base has become very large. Therefore, the yearly increase slowed down. However, it is definitely, you know, is increasing. The fourth aspect of CERI, you know, practically is simplify custom facility formalities and reconceptualize consumer protection. So Chinese customs require products that are imported in China for the first time to complete a licensing, registration, or record filing procedures. This is typically very burdensome for formula milk, for example, because if you like to register your formula milk, which may take 2 or 4 years, and it costs a lot of money. However, CERI products are exempted from these requirements. More practically, you are not required to translate your English product instruction into Chinese if you sell products while CERI. So what you need to do is you post a risk notification letter, which clearly, you know, lists the difference in terms of quality, you know, if you comply with Australian quality requirement. So what are the difference between the Australian law and Chinese law regarding the product quality? You also inform Chinese consumer that the products expressed to you will only have English instruction. And if consumers require a Chinese instruction, they need to log online, etc. So this is very cost effective. There are 2 exceptions. And the first exception is for products imported from epidemic areas. And the second is, you know, if there are quality and safety risk, there will be some, you know, further requirement. The fifth aspect of CERI is it is subject to a product catalog. Currently, there is more than 1,000 products are listed. So here are some examples. There are products you can only export to China while bonded imports. Some products is limited to the quota, right? Everybody 20 kilograms. So there are other requirements. There are 2 important things I would like to bring your attention regarding this catalog. The first one is, although CERI is supposed to satisfy individual consumer needs, some products here, so for example, this one actually can be used for industry. And the second is how the Chinese government build up this catalog to select products in the catalog is untransparent, is not transparent. So actually this is an issue, you know, for Chinese government for the future. They need to make it more transparent. The last thing is, I hope you can pay more attention to the pharmaceutical products, medicine import to China while CERI, especially pay attention to the recent reform in the Beijing Free Trade Zone. Okay, there are some new very favorable trade facilitation measures to import foreign medicines to China. So the last one is regarding market access. This is the problem of CERI, and I argue that it violated WTO because in CERI, the foreign suppliers are required to sell products through e-commerce platforms provider registered in China. And I think there is an inconsistency in China requiring foreign product suppliers to use platform owned by a third party to conduct CERI. And here the third party is always a Chinese company. Foreign suppliers should be allowed to use their own e-commerce websites. And I argue that it violated Article 3rd of GATT 1994, and there are jurisprudence to support my view. So for detailed information, you can refer to my paper. Okay, so thank you very much. All the questions are welcome. Thank you, Edison. So I stop sharing. Okay. Oh, you are mute? You are mute?
Sorry, you would think I'd know by now about getting off mute. Thank you very much, Dr. Huang, for that really interesting outline of the legal framework regarding cross-border e-commerce, and I'll let people know that these slides will be available for you to look at after this. Collect all your questions, because I'm sure you have lots of those, and start putting those in the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. Now, Victor, would you like to share your screen? And while you're doing that, I will give you an introduction. So Victor is going to provide the business perspective on cross-border e-commerce. Victor is General Manager of Blossom's BH Wholesale and the Director of its parent group, Phoenix Beauty. So he's been leading the company and conducting its cross-border e-commerce expansion since 2014. So very well placed to talk about the business experience of cross-border e-commerce, and has been working with a number of different e-commerce platforms and more than 70 Australian brands. So Victor, will hand over to you to give your presentation before we open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you so much, Dr. Huang. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for time this afternoon. In the next 10 minutes, probably I would like to give you a brief introduction of our views and also practices in cross-border e-commerce in China. Firstly, I would like to give you a brief introduction of our company. We started our business since 2006, and we have two main business divisions right now. Phoenix Beauty is actually taking care of the retail and cross-border, the online B2C side, including cross-border retail sales, marketing, live streamings, etc. And Blossom's BH Wholesale is more likely to looking after the B2B business, including the cross-border e-commerce supply chain service. And right now we are running more than 20 physical retail shops in Sydney. And we actually work with more than 200 brands in beauty, health, dairy categories. And also for cross-border, like the CERI system, as Dr. Huang mentioned just now, we are running 11 online pop shops across the CERI platforms, such as the Kaola, Little Red Book, Pinduoduo, etc. Here are the core brands we are working with right now, because Blossom is actually the authorized distributor and helping more than 70 brands to develop the markets in Australia, in China, and also the ASEAN markets. We covering main product categories such as beauty, health, mom and baby, including the formulas, food, wood products, etc. We actually started our cross-border e-commerce journey since 2015 and opened our first JD store later in the year. So far, actually, cross-border e-commerce has already been proved to be one of the greatest milestones in China's foreign trade history. And I think everyone would be quite impressed by the development of cross-border e-commerce in China right now. I have some figures here provided by iResearch, probably slightly different from Dr. Huang shared with us just now. And the left chart shows the CERI import market value and the annual growth rate from 2016 up to right now. And although in 2020, it dropped a little bit due to the COVID, but because COVID actually basically all under control in China right now, so the markets boost very quickly again. For ourselves, in cross-border e-commerce sales, we started from 2015, and right now, actually we have an average growth for more than 200% every year. And at this moment, cross-border e-commerce already accounts for 58% of our overall business, and followed by 36% in the domestic trade in Australia, and also 6% in ASEAN markets and some other emerging markets as well. In these slides, you'll be able to find some of the platforms we're working with directly or indirectly right now. Audience today should be quite familiar with all these platforms, and there are two main import models, as Dr. Huang mentioned just now, the bonded model and also the direct import model. And actually, we're using both models to work with all these platforms. So for small and medium brands, probably more likely to use the direct import model, which is the direct mailing model as well, which will be able to provide a better flexibility. Although the cost may be a lot higher than the bonded model because of especially in the logistic, but it's much easier to launch a product for sale online, and also much less risky in the stock management. On the other hand, for the top selling products like the baby formulas or some probably big health supplement brands, we should prefer to use the bonded model for a better efficiency in logistic and also for cost saving as well. And actually, the speedy delivery in the last mile will definitely create a better customer satisfaction for consumers in China as well. For bonded warehouse model, right now, actually we set up our first bonded warehouse in May 2020, and now we are running bonded warehouses in 6 different cities in China. The reason we do that is for a better efficiency, as I mentioned just now, because China is such a big country, and it is easier to facilitate some of the platforms because, for example, in Fuzhou, they have a very good, well-established infrastructure to supply for the JD channels. And on the other hand, in Ningbo, for example, it has a very well-established China system to facilitate the sales on the Alibaba group, including Tmall, Taobao, etc. And in this slide, I'd like to talk about some market challenges in China right now. Of course, China is still a very massive and lucrative market full of opportunity for Australian business because of its population, its fast-growing economy, its growing demand for the high-quality products, and also the fantastic infrastructure setup, especially for e-commerce. But for ourselves, even though we have the Chinese background, sometimes definitely we still have many challenges when we run the cross-border e-commerce business. The first challenge I'd like to talk about is the legal compliance, especially for this year. Many of the platforms has been introducing many tougher and stricter requirements for any product listed and new brands listed on the platforms. Of course, this is a good challenge because it's a good way to protect the benefit of the Chinese consumer, and also on the other hand, protect the Australian manufacturer as well. And of course, right now, many platforms may probably ask for all kinds of different documents, or especially legal documents, including authorization letters, trademark certificates, health certificates for export. It might take much longer process before you can list your product for sale, and before you can get through all the validation. So for Australian business, you may expect more time to prepare. And the second challenge is the highly fragmented e-commerce environment in China. In fact, the e-commerce in China has already been highly fragmented, especially after antitrust investigation against some big platforms this year. So for consumers in China, they may have even more than 5 online shopping apps on their mobile phones to cross compare the prices, the offers. So for auction business, definitely is good news because we don't need to stick with only 1 or 2 platforms. We have more choices. But for the new brands, especially who may have a limited resource or budget in marketing, then we may need to choose wisely and carefully to maximize our return on investment. The third challenge will be probably in the competition, especially the global competition. According to the data from the last Double 11 promotion, there are more than 2,000 Australian brands selling in cross-border e-commerce in China. And this kind of competition is not only among Australian brands ourselves, but also other brands from US, from Europe, from Japan, or even the rising Chinese brands. So in the 618 promotion just finished last month, there are more than 250,000 brands selling on just Tmall, just one platform. So you can imagine how fierce the competition will be. However, I believe this kind of competition in this criteria will be more likely to promote the efficiency improvement and product upgrade, which probably will be the positive way of competition. The fourth challenge, probably the negative way of competition. These 2 Chinese characters here is called Neijian, which is one of the hottest slang in China right now, especially for this year. So for Neijian, it's actually in English it's called involution, which is a direct translation from English actually. So it represents some kind of vicious competition within the industry. For example, many businesses within the same industry may find they are probably investing even more right now in the market, but the return on investment is much less than before. So because everyone's doing the same way. So also, we did see some of the business is even probably doing or triggering some kind of price war or doing business under cost. We don't believe this is a healthy and sustainable way to do business, especially in the cross-border e-commerce channel. Here, I do have some suggestions to handle the challenges I mentioned. Now, of course, for different business, may have different solutions for e-commerce business in China. But due to the limited of time, I'll probably pick these 4 suggestions, which I believe will be worth for consideration, especially for an entry strategy into the cross-border e-commerce business in China. The first one is very important. I think it's IP protection. I think it should be on the top of the list. And also it's not only applies to China, but also other markets as well. So Australian businesses need to make sure their IP is protected before you enter any new markets, not only the trademark, but also some other areas like your domain, your design, your patents, etc. The second suggestion is the way to strengthen your brands. Because in China, as I mentioned, there are probably hundreds of thousands of brands selling in the same channel. So Chinese consumers now are so spoiled because they have so many options, so many choices. It is very likely to fall into involution I mentioned just now if our products or service are not differentiated. I suggest for Australian business and manufacturers to focus more on R&D to build up our comparative advantages, and which will be able to help us to get more attention and more support in the cross-border e-commerce market in China. The third suggestions would be the legacy management or refined management in cross-border e-commerce. Actually, this is a very big topic because the public traffic in China, especially in the cross-border e-commerce, has already come to a bottleneck, and the cost of the customer acquisition is extremely high right now. So for Australian business, if possible, we may probably consider to build up our private traffic pool, or to use certain tools or systems to maintain our loyalty customers, and also eventually to improve the conversion rate. To make it simple is to understand the consumer behaviors in depth. So the last suggestion is finding the right partner, especially for Australian business. Know probably not too much about the market, and what my suggestion is to try to find out the latest trend, latest data, and talk to some of your channel partners or even distributors like us, and make sure to find the right partner who can manage the channel properly and maintain a healthy pricing structure, and also to minimize the risks as well. So that's pretty much I would like to talk about today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Victor. It was great to get that really practical business perspective on cross-border e-commerce. Now we will open up the floor to questions. So if you have questions of either Dr. Huang or Victor To, please put them in the Q&A section. I'll kick things off by just asking a question of Dr. Huang. So it seems that cross-border e-commerce is a way of overcoming the need to pay tariffs. And of course, we've had punitive tariffs placed on Australian wine. So is it an option then for Australian wine exporters to use cross-border e-commerce to get to their customers in the current circumstances?
Thank you very much, Alison. So there are two very important concepts. So one is more broadly, which is cross-border e-commerce. I see in Victor's presentation, and he used the abbreviation, which is the CBEC, cross-border e-commerce. So CERI, cross-border retail e-commerce is only one example of cross-border e-commerce, because cross-border e-commerce you can do generally B2B or generally B2C, but the CERI is only one type of. So if you would like to do CERI, you need to satisfy three requirements. The first is the products must be sold currently, through an e-commerce platform. And this e-commerce platform is not a party in the sales contract. So the sales contract is between Australian exporters and Chinese consumers. And the e-commerce platform is only a third party, to help to provide a platform, the first requirement. And the second actually is more important, is the products exported to China must go through the specific custom code. So just now in my slides, there are two custom code, 12110, and which is the bounded import, which is the most popular one. So you must go through the certain custom code. And the last one is it must go through the pilot cities. But due to 4 months ago, last March, Chinese government significantly increased the number of pilot cities, so which make in practice is much easier to do. Now go back to your questions. I think yes, indeed. I also relate to Victor's, tremendous practical experience. If you have good Chinese partner, because you need to make sure your sales data has to be shared by Chinese custom, because Chinese custom must ensure it is a Chinese consumer who buy the products rather than a Chinese dealer who buy a large amount of products and then to resell in Chinese market. No, you must make sure, it's a consumer. So overall, I would say it is a practical way to avoid the tariff. Yeah, because it goes through the different custom code, so not subject to the tariff. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So as long as it's bought by an end consumer, then that's okay. But I guess it's a lot more complex than large volume exports that many of the winemakers will currently be making.
Yes, yes. So actually, you require a change of a business model. So you need to actually really target the consumer.
Yes. Okay. Now you've already answered this one online, but I might get you to answer it for everybody else. The source of information on the new regulations and also the CERI catalogue that you mentioned. So there was that question and another question about will CIQ code registration still be required for sales in China, or is it acceptable if they're registered in Hong Kong? So if you could answer those questions, if you can, for the benefit of everybody.
Can you just explain what's the CIQ? So where is the question? Yes.
So one of the people on the line have asked, will the CIQ code registration still be required? Is that something you're familiar with?
Victor, do you know what's the CIQ code?
It's the quarantine in China.
Okay. So my answer has two parts. So the first part is if you sell your products, so for example, baby formula milk, you go through CERI. Actually, you are not required to register your formula with the relevant Chinese government. You can, but you need to have a risk notification letter online. Of course, actually, Victor mentioned nowadays the e-commerce platform has a much higher requirement. Not only you need to demonstrate your business qualifications, but other requirements. But basically, let's comply with Australian law, and rather than you need to comply with the relevant Chinese, the Chinese quality or etc. Other requirement. And the second is regarding the sanitary inspections. Because the products will be delivered, if you do direct import, and the products will be delivered from Australia to China, and the relevant container actually need to go through the sanitary, all the relevant requirement in order to make sure, it is clean, etc. But it is not a requirement regarding, the quality issue. So that's actually is an argument that I made in my paper. It gives autonomy to consumers, because the consumers has freedom to decide to select products made according to foreign quality standard, rather than, all the products in China must comply with Chinese standard, because we know that sometimes Chinese standards actually are lower than foreign standards. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now I've got another question here. So as an e-commerce business in Australia with my own website, would I need to apply for a license myself, or should I use a third-party platform in China? And can that platform organize a license for me?
And you need to use a third-party platform in China. So this is my argument that China violated WTO. This third-party platform must register in China, okay, registered in China. Usually it is a platform owned by Chinese company. So whether the platform will organize the license for you, it depends on the platform. Also, sometimes you may need a Chinese local agent to do that for you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next question is to Victor, and I guess it is relevant to the CIQ question. Is there much fresh food categories going through cross-border e-commerce? Do you know the answer to that? That's not your field, but do you have a sense for that?
To our experience, not too many. The first reason is probably it has of course we are doing not too many fresh food in our business right now, but for fresh food, as Dr. Huang said, there might be some extra requirement, especially in the quarantine, before it can enter either through the CERI system or through the bonded system. And also another issue for fresh food industry need to concern is about the expiry date. Because for all the bonded warehouses or platforms selling through CERI system, they have that some probably detailed requirement on the shelf life or the expiry date of the products. Normally, the fresh food expiry date probably would be less than beauty products or health supplements. So I think it is still some way to go through the CERI system, but for bonded model, maybe it might be a little bit risky.
Okay, thank you. Now we've got a question for Dr. Huang from Lin Lin. And she asks, I think this is a question that many of us are asking, when do you think the situation between the two countries will improve or will it get worse?
I think it will depend on the time, so there are two parts of my answer. The first part is if you only look at Australia and China, and the second is you bring in United States. So between Australia and China, the basic issue actually is the trade. China is the biggest importer of many Australian products. So there are, in terms of the trade, these two countries are closely related. However, go to my second question, which is for politicians, and trade may not be always a priority for them. There are security issues, political issues, so if we consider the United States and like the two rise, China is the rising power and United States is a superpower. So the battle between US and China and Australia is, is in between. So as we see that the trade is not a really a priority issue for our government now. So I would say it will take time. Near future, 5 years, definitely, I would say the situation will be better. But how about 5 months? I don't know whether the 5 months, possibly in 5 months, it will be same as now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, certainly businesses still want to do business with each other, and so let's hope that the situation improves as soon as possible. But I think businesses and consumers between the two countries want to keep connecting. This one is for you, Victor. And Victor, you're a little bit softer than the other speakers. I'm not sure whether there's something you can do about that. But this question is to you, and it's can you talk about the impact of COVID on the logistics side of cross-border e-commerce?
For logistics side, definitely due to the COVID, there were a lot less flights coming back and forth between both countries. So you can imagine the cost will be a lot higher and make it even harder to make any bookings, no matter through air freight or sea freight. So cost is one consideration. And second one is the time schedule. So for Australian exporters or a business that running through a CERI system and sending out parcels directly to Chinese consumer through the direct mailing model, it might take a little bit longer than usual during the COVID period. And also, according to some latest probably regulation or practice in China, like in Guangdong previously, or which have suffered from a much spread of COVID in the last couple of weeks. So we can see a significant delay in the delivery. So put it this way, when the products or parcels arrive in China, it may take much longer process to examine, to make sure every parcel is safe without any virus or infection. And also the whole logistics system might be also being affected because they have less people to making the delivery to the end consumers. So the cost, time, and is probably the main issue causing through the COVID. And we can see in the recent couple of weeks, even for the sea freight, for the containers, the cost, running costs and booking costs is much higher than before. So because the logistics part is definitely a very important consideration and factor we need to evaluate in our cross-border business. So if we have any contracts need to be fulfilled or need to be in accordance with the platform's regulations or requirement that within some particular time frame, we need to make sure parcels to delivered to the customers on door-to-door basis. So we need to have this in mind and make sure everything in our logistic, the whole train will be going smoothly, and make sure to improve our efficiency in handling all the shippings, and especially for the parcels.
Thank you. And Victor, how important has cross-border e-commerce been to your business in the context of the pandemic? Have you been able to offset some of the losses that you might have experienced in the domestic market?
Yes, definitely. Yes, definitely. We actually have probably more than 10% decline in local business, but for cross-border e-commerce side, we have a significant growth. So some kind of offset. So we are very lucky to obtain still a business growth in the in the last financial year. So I think cross-border e-commerce still very popular and still in an upward trend, and also have a huge customer base and foundation in China. So it's worth for every Australian business to consider to promote our products, our service to our customers in China. And although right now we are suffering from complex case through the relationship between countries, but eventually I believe things will get better and business will be coming back.
That's a great answer. I always love hearing positive stories, so thank you. Now we are going to launch a poll, so if people online could just take a moment to look at that poll. Joanna, if you could launch that one, that would be great. In the meantime, if I can just ask a question of Jeanne. I suppose it's a big picture question. I mean, this is a great opportunity that China is offering to Chinese businesses to market directly to Chinese consumers. What is its motivation for doing this?
Okay, there are two motivations. Actually, I argue that those motivations are continuing. And so the first one is, since 2018, actually due to the Trump administration, it pushed China to import more rather than export. Okay, so you see the change of China's trade policy is a shift from focusing on export from a balanced approach, both import and export. And this is in another background, international US pressure. And the second is the domestic, the consumer needs. And Chinese consumer, especially the middle class, and the populations are expanding. And this is especially popular, important for Australian products in the healthcare, in the baby care, food and all those things. And the second, I argue, is China has a strong national and strategic interest in shaping the international law for e-commerce. Here, the e-commerce, not only our tangible products, but more important is the regulation of the platforms. That's the reason why it requires, all the business, CERI, you must use a Chinese e-commerce platform, because the platform is a very important way to shape the economy. If everybody use it, and the good practice derived from the industry may become international law, and China has a strong interest in pushing, in that direction. So I think, these two elements combined, to enable Chinese Ministry of Trade and MOFCOM to continue to offer zero tariff and 70% deduction of VAT and consumption tax. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess you've been arguing that foreign platforms should be permitted to take part in Chinese cross-border e-commerce. It sounds like that's not very likely given China's motivation for promoting the system. Is that what, would you agree with that?
To be more precise, foreign e-commerce platforms are allowed to conduct cross-border e-commerce in China, but they are not allowed to conduct CERI. There are different ways that you sell products to China. And B2C, you can use foreign platform like Amazon or eBay. They also sell products directly, or like a cosmetic Sasa and Victor probably know. They all sell products to China and B2C. But if you like to do CERI, which actually Chinese government created CERI in order to offset the side effect of Daigou. The Daigou has created a lot of problems and quality issues, how to return the products, and tariff, not tariff, they use postal tax, all those issues. So and CERI is something to fill in the gap. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you very much to both of our speakers. I've learned a lot. I did try to do the survey, and I was going to say that I found it very insightful, but I got a message saying that panelists are not allowed to vote. But you certainly have my vote. It's been a really practical and very useful and incisive session. The presentations will be made available to people so that they can go back to them. Stay tuned for more e-commerce related events for ACBC. We've got one coming up on setting up a Chinese language website if you don't speak Chinese. We've also got one coming up on Little Red Book, one of the platforms, and also new rules coming out to claim government grants under the Export Market Development Grant Program. So if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to our newsletters, and we'd love to have you as part of as a member of our network if you're not currently members. But thank you once again to our speakers for a fantastic presentation, and thanks to everybody, and I wish you a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.